Thank you
Awesome.
everyone for joining today's session on CADLink. And we're going to be talking about how we can simplify your design to production process with CADLink for Sage 100. So let's get going here. Let me do a quick introduction to the team and at least put a face to the voice, or the voices, I should say, to this webinar. So you have me, Gael Benoit, on the far left here of the screen, who's going to be the voice guiding you throughout this webinar. And I'm an account manager here at QBuild with Tiffany as well, who is also an account manager, and we both handle the Sage practice here at QBuild. In the center, I have Nauki with me today, who is one of our senior solutions engineer, and he'll be going through a live demonstration of CADLink when we get to that later on in the webinar today. All right, so the agenda that I have for today, I'm going to be talking about QBuild, who we are. Then we'll jump into why CADLink and what is CADLink. And then we'll have Nauki do the live demonstration of CADLink and show you how it looks and the functionalities. And then that'll be followed by the benefits and highlight what we saw there in the webinar. And then lastly, we'll leave some times for a Q&A. Okay, so about QBuild. QBuild is a software development company that specializes in providing engineering solutions in the CAD to ERP space. So what we see here is a simple map of some of our products, which all exist in the CAD, PDM, PLM systems, and the ERP. So essentially, all of these solutions facilitate communication and accurate data transfer. I'll briefly go over some of these other solutions that we see here on a high level note, but today's focus is going to be about CADLink, which we see here in the center. So where are we located? QBuild is headquartered in Toronto, Canada. We do have offices in the US, Germany, Sri Lanka, and Japan. So we are a global company. We accommodate all the time zone, and then also various different languages like English, French, German, Japanese, Russian, and many more. Okay, so as promised, here's a few high-level points on some of the other solutions that we provide other than CADLink. So on my right side, we have Embalm, which is a tool that allows you to manipulate an engineering bill of material to a manufacturing bill of material. On the left side, I have ECX Manager, which is a web-based system used to streamline and integrate engineering change processes with your ERP. On the bottom right, I have Nestlink, which Nestlink is a tool that synchronizes material inventory and work order data with the nesting software now instead of the CAD software. It's the nesting software. So things like Sigma Nest, ProNest, right? Any of those nesting softwares, we integrate with that and the ERP. And then lastly, we have ConfigLink on the bottom left side. And ConfigLink integrates your configurator to a CAD system, right? So giving you the ability to automate the modeling process and generate models and drawing files. So if you want to know a bit more about some of these other solutions, feel free to reach out to myself, Nauki, or Tiffany, and we can provide some more information on those other solutions as well. Okay, so let's dive a bit deeper on CADLink. So CADLink began back in 2002 with a simple link between AutoCAD and a database. As you can see today, right, we have many CAD, PDM, and PLM partners that we've built a relationship with over the years. So we have many integrations that cover the full range of our customer base. So we have the big players like SolidWorks, we have Autodesk, we have Siemens, we have a bunch of different CAD systems or PDM or PLM partners. And if you don't see your CAD system here, you can check out our website. We have the full list there. This is pretty much a screenshot of everything that I could add on this slide. But if you don't see it here, feel free to check out the website. There's a full list. And if you're still not sure on there, you can feel free to reach out to myself. All right, so why CADLink? Well, we see a lot of ERP challenges that engineering faces without CADLink. Starting off with product development. So if it takes longer time to go from engineering to production, therefore struggling with getting the data into Sage 100 quickly and accurately, then that means it takes longer to go to market. It means that there's less time spent on creating products to sell and more time spent on data entry, which is not what we want, right? So depending on how well that goes, your product development can suffer as the design to manufacturing time suffers. Next, we have product quality. So again, relating that back to getting accurate data into Sage 100, and you'll probably hear me say this quite often throughout this webinar, but ensuring that we can eliminate things like wrong builds, which can result in spending time rebuilding, remanufacturing, or scrapping entirely. So if we can ensure that we have good product quality, then that means there's less sunk cost. Now, the next one is engineering resources, and I think that goes without saying, right? If the engineering team or your engineering resources are spending time on manual data entry or trying to get the data from their CAD system into Sage 100, then they're not spending their time wisely, right? That's definitely a challenge there, and that's can reduce some of their project and design capacity. And lastly, we have data management. So that double or triple data entry that's happening, and then downstream confusion that can happen due to not having that accurate data inside Sage 100. All right, so let's talk about some of the alternatives that we commonly see in the industry. The first one is the brute force method. It's manual entry. There's zero software cost, but it is very error prone, right? You can imagine that if I have two screens open or I got two windows going on and trying to type my bill of material or my item information from my design into Sage, right? That can have a lot of errors because human errors happen, right? And it's not something that we can avoid, and they just happen. Next, it is time consuming, right? It takes a lot of time to basically walk the information from one side of the street to the other. And then lastly, it's boring, right? It's not fun. It's not work that anyone wants to be doing, but it is important information that we need to capture. Now, the second method is the blind push here, which is kind of an export import that's being done from the CAD system to the ERP. It is slightly faster than the brute force method that we just talked about, but it does require data massaging, meaning that the export that you may get from your CAD system is more likely than not the right format to import that into Sage. So there's definitely some work that's required there. It's not a bidirectional connection, right? Meaning that the bill of materials are not synchronized, right? We can't write information back. It's usually just a one-way push. And then we have the last piece here, which is often reliant on a single person, right? Typically, we see that maybe one of the ITs has built some macro in order to do an export import or CSV type. And if they decide to leave the company or they retire, right, then no one really knows how to maintain this macro that they've built, or quite frankly, how to utilize it. So those are the two alternatives that we see that are very common when we first talk to customers that aren't using CADLink. All right, so we talked about why CADLink, right? We talked some about some of the challenges that engineering faces with getting that information into Sage 100. We talked about some alternative methods that we see. Now, what is CADLink, right? What's this tool? So CADLink is a tool that uses a real-time bidirectional link to pull and push item and bill of material information from your CAD model and Sage 100. And not only CAD model, but the PDM or the PLM. So it can automatically create parts that are just modeled in your item master, highlight discrepancies between the data sets, and synchronize your CAD and Sage 100 bill of material. So CADLink makes changes to 2 different data sets in one interface in order to reduce making that multiple data entries and avoid those mistakes. All right. So with that being said, we're at the demo portion of the webinar. So now, Key, I'll stop sharing here and then I'll let you take over.
Sounds good. Thanks, Gael. All right, so everyone should be looking at my screen now, which has the CAD system open. So as Gael mentioned, the CADLink we're looking at today supports many different connectors to various CAD, PDM, and PLM systems. So I'm using a CAD system called SolidWorks today. It's a 3D modeling system, quite popular. We have a lot of customers using it. You may use different CAD system. You may have a PDM or PLM system that you're running that you want to integrate directly with. The good news is that the CADLink user interface, how it works, the user experience of it is essentially the same, regardless of what system your engineers are using. So even though I'm using this, demonstration with the SolidWorks, and you have a different systems, you're still gonna, get a lot of values from, watching this demonstration because it's basically the same tool, whether the, data comes from the SolidWorks or a different CAD system. And again, one of the things that we want to emphasize is that this is a direct integration. What that means is we're not exporting any data to Excels or CSVs or anything like it, right? It's a direct API integration with your CAD and your Sage 100 ERP system, right? So this 3D model that you see in front of you right now, this 3D model is what we're going to be using to extract the items and bills of material data, right? There's no Excel files or no CSV files in the background. This 3D model is where we're grabbing all the data from. And you will actually be able to run CADLink from within your SolidWorks or your CAD system. Basically, CADLink becomes an add-in that will appear inside your CAD interface. So your engineers, to use this tool, they don't need to go anywhere, right? They are already in their CAD system, whatever the engineering system that they use, and CADLink is found within it, right? They're not switching to a different application. They don't need to go anywhere else. They can start right there. Now, I'm gonna click this add-in to start this CADLink, and once I start, CADLink will be talking to your engineering system, and it's gonna bring in items and bills of material data. With a lot of the 3D modeling CAD system, the 3D model itself gives us the bills of material data, that the parent-child relationship, the hierarchy, the quantity information, right, comes just naturally from your 3D model, how the engineers designed it. The individual item informations like item code, the revision, the item description, that will come from your individual CAD file property. So it is important to make sure that your engineers are putting basic information in each of their CAD design and their file property. And really, to use CADLink, the required information is the item code. That's really the only piece that is like 100% required, because the item code that you see here, this is what allows CADLink to compare your CAD data to what's inside your Sage 100 ERP system. Item code is what we're using to uniquely identify each of these assemblies and components. So we do need the item code in your CAD property, or at least your CAD file name, perhaps, it needs to be an item code. So CADLink can be programmed to pick up that information. Now, in addition to the item code, I would also highly recommend having a description and a revision in your CAD property. Now, that's really it, though, in terms of what we recommend or what's required before you can start using CADLink. And all of those things, item code, revision, description, they're pretty basic information that the chances your engineers do have that information on, right? So you can add as much information as your engineers want to in the CAD property, and we, CADLink, can take as much information out of it, send it to the Sage 100 ERP system. But in terms of what you need, very basic: item code, revision, description, right? We're not asking your engineers to start adding additional information and create more work for them, right? All they need to do is get the basic information in the CAD, and their file is already ready to be used with CADLink. Now, this interface that opened up, right? This is the CADLink user interface. And let me walk you through what's happening on the screen, what your engineers will be doing here. So the first thing to note is that within this CADLink user interface, I am presented with this bill of material grid. And this is the bill of material of that 3D model that we were just looking at, right? So that 3D model, all the data translated into just a simple bill of material screen is this. You can see the top level assembly with indentations showing different sub-assemblies and components, all the way down to the lowest level parts. And each lines represents, right, assembly or item, and they have item code, they have revision, they have description, they have the quantity also, right? And probably the first thing that many of you notice is the colors, right? Different items, different properties are highlighted in various colors by CADLink in this screen. And this is the result of the comparison. The CADLink, every time the engineers use this tool, in order to bring this data into the Sage 100, CADLink automatically compare all of the items and bills of material data between the two systems. We do this live data comparison automatically, and we highlight to show, to bring engineers' attention where they need to review and validate the data. Because anywhere there's a highlighting, there's basically a data mismatch, or there's a difference in data between the two systems, engineering system and your ERP system. Right. So as an engineer, one of the jobs of engineers in CADLink is going to be to review these colors, review the data that's in front of you before you actually hit the save button. Before you actually save this into Sage 100, let's have one more quick look at all the data, all the changes, make sure they are all correct, right? Let's validate them. Let's be confident in the data that we are sending to the ERP system, right? Because the last thing we want is, extract the data automatically, dump it into the ERP, not checking anything, and we end up with some bad data or mistakes. And now you're back having purchasing errors, reworks, delay shipments, right? All these bad things happen. So it's critical to help engineers validate the data, make sure it's accurate, and we do so by doing the comparison for you. You don't need to compare the data. All you need to do is pay attention to the colors. So let me walk you through the colors, what they mean. And one of the first things to note is the white versus the green. So some of these line items are white, some of them are green. The white represent items that already exist in the ERP, in the Sage 100. So these are in your Sage 100 item master database. These item code, it's there. They exist. We don't need to create a new record. It's there. The green, so the opposite of that is the new, right? We need to add new item code to your Sage 100 item master database because it doesn't exist yet. And CADLink will do that for us. It's going to create a new item record. So as an engineer, when I'm looking at this bill of material and if I see something in green, CADLink is telling me that that's something new. Did you design a brand new component, brand new assembly? Are you trying to create this new item in the Sage 100? And my job as an engineer to look at these green items and confirm, right? Or did we create these new items? Are they really something new that we should be creating in Sage? So right away, you can see that, right? New item versus existing items. And on these existing white items, some of them are not completely white, right? They have the yellow highlightings on, for example, description or a quantity. And once again, wherever there's a color, there is some kind of a data discrepancies. So the yellow is the field level, right? Individual property level discrepancies. So item exists in both CAD and ERP, but item description turns out to be different. My CAD description and my Sage 100 item master description, they're not same right now. That's why this description is highlighted in yellow. And as an engineer, when I see something like this, I want to investigate, right? What's my Sage description? What's my CAD description? Which one is more accurate? Which one's the correct description to be using, right? That I will be thinking that as an engineer here. And all I need to do as an engineer to resolve this discrepancy in CADLink is first right-click. CADLink will show you. Here's your CAD description. Here's your Sage description. Now you can look at them side by side. I can see exactly how they're different. And all I need to do as an engineer is to simply select which description do I tell CADLink is the correct one. So you can simply choose CAD versus ERP here. Let it know. Or if you found that the neither descriptions are up to the company standards, turns out you want to fix them both. Neither of them are good enough. You can actually start typing in a new description right here. You can edit this right here in this CADLink grid. And the great thing about CADLink is it is a bi-directional integration, meaning if you change the description, let's say I change the description here right now. I'm going to say I'm going to add some description here. This is really the proper description we should be using. Now, by doing so, when you save, doing so when you save, what's going to happen is CADLink will update this description both in the Sage and in the CAD property. We can write back and automatically update your engineer's CAD file properties. And that will allow us to synchronize the data. So CADLink having this bidirectional capability is a great for the engineers because they can basically benefit from this, and their CAD property are automatically, as they use CADLink, automatically getting cleaned up, or missing information are getting populated in their CAD properties. So CADLink is not just a tool that they use to keep the Sage bill of materials and items up to date. They can also, this CADLink can also help the engineers clean up and populate their CAD properties as well. Now, let's talk about the quantity in yellow as well. So just like a description, when you see a yellow quantity, that's a discrepancy. You can right click, you can look at the CAD quantity, ERP quantity, how they're different. Are you adding? Are you reducing a quantity? What's happening? Now, the difference with the quantity column is that you cannot change this. You cannot change the quantity like I was doing with the description. And that's by design. That's on purpose. CADLink is programmed to take the bill of material quantity always from the CAD. Your engineer's CAD design should be the driver, the main driver of the bill of material quantity. Therefore, we do not allow you to change the quantity in this grid. Only way to change the quantity is to do so in the CAD, right? Add another part, subtract the part from the assembly. That's the only way to change the quantity, right? Because even if CADLink allowed you to change the quantity, what CADLink wouldn't know is how that part will fit, right? Where that's going to be fitted, where it's going to be positioned, in respect with everything else in the assembly, right? Only engineers, the designers can figure that out, right? CADLink wouldn't know how to position it. So in order to keep the consistency of the bill of material and the design data between the CAD and what's in your ERP system, we force your engineers to always correct the CAD, make sure the CAD has the correct bill of material and the quantity, and we will always take the CAD information in terms of the bill of material to update the Sage, right? Not the other way around. Something like item description or even revision, these are properties of the CAD, so we can write back, but the bill of material structures and quantities are always driven by your CAD design. Now, the last color we see on the green on this grid is this gray row, this line item in gray. Now, gray color is a color we use to highlight a component that needs to be deleted from the Sage bill of material. So gray is a change in the bill of material quantity, but it's a very specific, right? We're completely deleting this material component from the Sage bill of material. Why? Because it's already removed from the engineer's CAD design. So engineers already took this part out of the assembly. It's nowhere to be found in the CAD. That's why CADLink is highlighting this in gray. Once again, CADLink is taught that the CAD is the master of the bill of material. So if engineers say, we don't need this part anymore, they took it out already, we will do the same thing. We will update the Sage bill of material by removing this material line component and make sure that two bills of materials are in sync. Right, so very few colors, but it actually allows engineers to visualize new items, new bills of material, changing quantities, deletion of any materials that they need to review. Very few simple colors, but it actually provides a lot of useful information to the engineer so that they can quickly validate the changes and the data before they save, right? They don't need to look at the bills of material in two screens and two monitors and try to spot the difference. We let you know where you need to pay attention to save you time. Now, in the CADLink, again, the reviewing these data in the colors is one of the main things CADLink users will be doing. But you can also use CADLink to add additional information. So, for example, if you need to populate certain additional Sage 100, data, we can control different Sage 100 fields displayed in this grid. So right now we have a few examples like product line, the unit of measure, product type, and procurement type, and etc. And all of these are drop-down list in CADLink grid. So you can select. I can select the different product line code. I can select a different product type, right? So on and so on. So this will allow the CADLink user, the engineers, to have an opportunity to add additional ERP-specific information. Some of these information may not be present in the CAD model, and that's fine. Again, we don't want to force the engineers to add information into the CAD's properties, unnecessarily. If they don't need this information in the CAD, that's fine, because CADLink interface actually will give them an opportunity, a chance to add those, ERP-specific information here. Now, you can also, in certain cases, you may also manually insert additional BOM items. Manually adding a bill of material items can happen, even though earlier I said the BOM should be always driven by CAD, but that's limited to what the engineers are designing in the CAD, right? When we think about the bill of material in the Sage 100, you may have certain parts, components that are not engineered. Right? They're not really part of the design. Maybe they're consumables, right? Paint, lubricant, adhesives, things that will be consumed and used in the building of this assembly, but they're not something that engineers likely will design, right? They're not going to show up in the CAD bill of material. You might have packaging for the product that you ship out. That might be part of the bill of material. You may have labels and documentations, user manuals that goes with the product. Again, they are likely not part of the bill of material in the CAD. So with those exception items, those special non-CAD items, you also have the ability to manually insert an item in this CADLink interface. So again, that's definitely a feature that's available, but it's optional, right? You may or may not use this functionality. That really depends on your product, how you use your CAD, how you use your ERP, your Sage 100 system. But we do provide these added capabilities so that you are able to add additional information, right? If you need to add additional information to complete the data in the Sage 100, you have the opportunity to do so while this CADLink is open. So before you hit the save button, you review the data, make sure everything coming from the CAD is correct. And if necessary, you can also add these additional non-CAD information to complete the records here before we save this into Sage. Now that we went through the main CADLink user interface, let me show you some of the other screens the CADLink has. So on the left-hand side, we have these different menu option here. Right now, we're looking at this bill of materials screen, right? Again, that's the main interface, but we can also navigate to a different screen. So for example, this screen, this window shows the bill of material change summary. This is the summary of all the bills of material changes and all the line items and the new quantity and the old quantity and notes describing how it's being changed. For example, create new part and insert the bills of material. Right? Those are all the green colored items we saw in the bill of material grid, right? They are creating a new part and then adding it to the BOM. If you see insert the bill of material, those are not green, right? We're not creating a new part. This part already exists in Sage, but we do need to insert. You may see delete from bill of material. Well, that's the gray part that we talked about in the grid. So basically, all those different colors that we saw in the bill of material grid, that was, the bill of material change represented in the visual color format. Here, we take that information, summarize it in a written English, right? Plain English in a list format. So what's the use case for this screen, aside from being able to see this information? Well, one of the common ways that customers use this is exporting this. If you would like to export this list of bill of material changes, because this can be useful in, for your documentation purposes, right? Your internal engineering documentation purposes, tracking the changes. Or maybe you use this so you can email to other departments and let them know about the bill of material change that you just made. And, everything is already summarized here. So you can export, this summary in the list format in the Excel file format very easily from the CADLink. So you can use this data outside of this application if you want to use it for documentation purpose or communication purposes. Now, there's another use case that some of our customers enjoy with this screen. And I'm going to go back to the bill of materials screen to kind of walk you through what that use case is. CADLink can be used to update a portion of your design. You don't have to always synchronize the entire bills of material, right? In the real life scenario, sometimes you have long lead time items. They need to be added to the Sage before the rest of the designs are completed, right? That's a pretty common thing that a lot of companies and their engineers encounter. And the great thing about CADLink is, by launching from any assemblies, you can look at the entire bills of material and you can synchronize the entire bill of material at once, right? That's great. Ultimately, you need to release the entire BOM, so you need to do that. But CADLink also gives you an ability using this checkbox in this grid to say, CADLink, I don't want to save this subassembly, right? That's what I'm doing by unchecking. So using this, I can start unchecking all of these to say, hey, CADLink, all I want to save today is just these. I just want to create these 4 parts, add it to the BOM, to the subassembly. That's it. That's all I want to do. So you are able to control what you're actually releasing into the ERP system. You're not always forced to release the entire bills of material. Now, when you're making this, something like this, right? You're choosing only a portion of the bills of material to be saved. When you look at the bill of material change summary, as you can see, the list is much shorter, right? Because we're making a lot less changes. And again, this bill of material is not that big, but imagine if you had much larger bill of material where you need to scroll up and down and you have only a few items selected, scattered across different bills of material. Before you hit the save button, what you want to do is you want to make sure you unselected, deselected everything you don't want to save, right? You only selected the ones you want to save. And again, it's much easier to look at this and say, yes, 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 those are the parts that I wanted to save today. That means I unchecked, deselected everything I wanted to. If you see something here, then maybe you forgot to uncheck that part, right? So that's another way that some customers sometimes use this. When they're doing this kind of a partial bill of material upload, this gives the engineers a much shorter list that they can quickly double check to make sure they're not accidentally saving something that they didn't intend to. Now, the next tab is a tab where engineers can access their CAD properties. Now, all the data we're talking about, right? The part numbers, description, revision, they're all coming from my CAD property. But here in this CADLink interface, I can easily, as you can see, just select these items in the tree, in the BOM tree. And I can drill down and look at the individual CAD file property. Now, this is pretty useful for the engineers when they're using CADLink, because sometimes they just want to double check, something in their CAD property. And some of the CAD systems, the only way to really look at this property is, you actually have to, go back to the CAD model, drill into all these sub-assemblies, find the part, open the part, and now you can look at the properties. It can be quite, time consuming, or just requires many clicks. And when you're using CADLink, or you're already in this review mode, right? You can very easily just find the part and just check the properties, right? You never have to jump back into the CAD system. It's all here. It is read only. You're not supposed to be changing the properties from here in this grid, but you are able to access all of this information, so you can view them very quickly. Again, trying to minimize the clicks to save you time. And lastly, we also have this window called CADLink messages. The type of messages you will receive by CADLink here is going to be error messages, basically the validation messages. That's another thing that CADLink does for us. In addition to comparing the data, CADLink also validates your CAD data. So before we allow the CADLink user, the engineers, to save this into the Sage 100, we check to make sure your CAD data meets the requirement set by the Sage 100, right? Every ERP system has rules that you need to follow, right? Certain fields are required, right? You can't create a new item without a description, for example. Certain fields will have a character limit, right? The item number, item code, must be less than, X characters. And these are just the rules set in your ERP system that, you just have to follow those rules. And CADLink has all of those, the basic validation that Sage 100 does. CADLink also has the same validations built in to check all these items in the bills of material data. Make sure they are not breaking any rules that Sage 100 has. In fact, if there are any error messages here, CADLink will disable the save button, so you wouldn't even be able to save. So CADLink user wouldn't be able to save it, right? We will force the engineers to look at this message window so that they can resolve those errors. So again, that's another, another thing that CADLink does for your engineers to help improve the accuracy of the data. So that's the kind of demonstration of this CADLink user interface. As you can see, it's pretty straightforward, very user friendly, very easy to use. A lot of the engineers, they get trained on usually an hour to 2 hour remote session, and after that session, one session, they can start using CADLink for themselves, and very quickly they can get up to speed on using CADLink. So that's another great thing about this CADLink is, from the deployment point of view, it's very easy. No database, no servers, just a simple application you install on the engineer's CAD workstation. And from the training point of view, also it's very easy. So it's actually an integration that we can get up and running pretty quickly. Now let's also take a look at all of these data that we're talking about, right? How do they look inside a Sage 100 ERP system, right? So on the Sage 100 side, we are talking about items and bills of material, right? So the item maintenance screen, right? That's what CADLink is creating all these items. And the bill of material screen, right? That's where the bill of materials are being created. And we can actually take a look at those items in the Sage 100. So the one that we were using, if I search for that item, right? So that's the assembly that we were looking at, right? So this item record was created by CADLink. CADLink took the item code and description, right, from your CAD properties. Some of these informations were set by CADLink as well, either using a default value that you defined, or the engineers may specify a certain value here. So all those green items, as CADLink creates them, we're creating these new item record in your Sage 100 system. And we can also take a look at the bill of materials maintenance. Find that assembly, revision B. Let's go to the individual lines, right? You can see the component here, right? So in addition to creating that item record, CADLink will also automatically create this bill of materials record with the revision, right? With the components, with the quantity coming from the CAD, so you know that matches your CAD designs. And the last thing I want to mention or note before I finish my demonstration is that the demo that I showed you, this is just a standard out-of-the-box CADLink. The different fields that we saw, item code, revision, build type, description, quantity we saw in the CADLink, those are just a standard set of Sage 100 fields that CADLink is populating for you. But we are happy to set up a meeting to discuss with each of you your specific requirement, right? Perhaps you want CADLink to populate this drawing number field, right? Maybe this drawing number will be the same as your item code. Maybe it will be different, right? So if you have additional needs in terms of populating different fields in the item screen, in this bill of material screen, just because I'm not showing you in this CADLink demonstration doesn't mean we can't do it. CADLink is very flexible in terms of how we customize, upon request of our customers to meet their business process. So what I'm showing you is just a standard out-of-the-box CADLink to give you the capability overview of this solution and how it integrates. In terms of the details of individual fields that you want to populate in your Sage 100, we are able to gather those requirements with you and meet those requirements. So yeah, definitely let us know if you have questions after today's session in terms of hey, CADLink looks great, but can you make sure to populate this field in my Sage 100, right? If you have questions like that, we can absolutely set up a meeting to gather the requirement and make sure to include them in your CADLink project scope. So I know Gael has a few more slides that he wants to go over, and we want to have some time for the Q&A as well. So I'm going to wrap up my CADLink demo here. I'm going to stop sharing, and I will let Gael take over and get back on the PowerPoint presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Naoki, for that. All right. So once again, thank you, Naoki, for that amazing demonstration on CADLink and showing all the great functionalities of the tool and how it can be used. Let's go over some of the features, right, that we saw in the demonstration and highlight those. So the first one being that direct link, that direct integration to Sage 100. So as we saw, right, as Naoki showed in the demonstration, we saw how we launched CADLink directly from the CAD system as an add-in. And then we saw how I made the connection to Sage 100, right? So every time CADLink is launched, we're doing that live connection to Sage 100 to grab the most recent information that is in our ERP. Next is we saw how we can push revision information to the CAD and Sage 100. Therefore, the bidirectional capabilities of CADLink, as well as keeping the data in sync, right? We saw how Naoki talked about having different descriptions from the CAD system and Sage 100 and how we can control that and make changes and push bidirectionally to make sure that both our systems are in sync. And lastly, we saw how we can update items and bill of material information directly from our CAD system to Sage 100. All right, so the two main benefits that you get from utilizing the tool CADLink, right? And the first one being reduction in cost. So, engineers are freed from a burden of manually keeping engineering data in sync between both their CAD system and Sage 100. And therefore, they have more time to focus on value-added activities, right? Designing and innovating and project work. So all that software upkeep or utilizing the tools to your benefit, that can be brought to you, and then leave all that software stuff to us. And then the second is the improved data accuracy. So human errors and typos being eliminated by automating that data synchronization, like we saw during the demo. And that data comparison helps the engineers review the work before saving to Sage 100. So that auto data validation will help us improve the data integrity in Sage 100. And then ultimately, the better manufacturing data leads to better products and production process. So we're pretty much at the end here of the webinar. You can see some of our information here. I'm sure Kelly will probably pass on all of our information as well. So you have myself, Tiffany, and Naoki. If there's any questions after this webinar, whether that's CADLink related or some of the other solutions that I showed, or if there's any other questions on the demonstration that you saw today, feel free to reach out to any one of us, or as well, any one of the team at VBCC, and I'm sure they'll point you in the right direction.